Discover the incredible courage of a slave who braved the master's wrath to save his only son. The sun dipped low on Elijah's weary face as he toiled in the fields, sweat running down his back, soaking into the fabric of his tattered shirt. But even under that blistering southern sun, his heart swelled with love for his son, Samuel. Just 10 years old, Samuel was a bright spirit amidst the darkness of their world. Each chuckle, every question bursting from his lips, pierced the heavy veil of despair that weighed on their lives like a thick fog. He was Elijah's world, a beacon of hope, and a promise of a future that shone, however faintly, through the heart of oppression. But as the storm clouds gathered ominously in the distance, they were not just heralding bad weather, they were ushering in a tempest of trouble for Elijah and his community. Rumors buzzed through the fields like angry insects. The plantation master was making another cruel decision, one that threatened the very safety of sweet Samuel. Elijah's heart raced as fear gripped him like a vice. He had seen brothers and sisters torn away, never to be heard from again. The mere thought of losing his son ignited a fire in his chest. Father Samuel's voice cut through his thoughts, bright as a summer morning. "Can we play after work?" His wide, innocent eyes sparkled with anticipation. But the weight of fear clawed at Elijah's throat. He managed a tight smile, but worry etched lines deep into his face. This would be the last day they played carefree in the fields if he couldn't protect Samuel. Gathering his fellow slaves, Elijah's quiet strength inspired an urgent plan. They whispered among the rows of cotton, their breaths mingling with the sweet scent of the earth. As Elijah shared his thoughts, a bond tightened among them, their shared fear morphing into a fierce collective resolve. This was not just about Samuel, this was about reclaiming their dignity, their right to be fathers, mothers, and citizens. "Together, we stand," he urged, "for the love of our children." Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Yet, as night cloaked the town, Elijah found himself facing the master, trembling with a primal mix of love and fury. "You will not take my boy," he cried, his voice echoing through the stillness. The master's eyes shone with malice, a predator savoring the fear of his prey. Tensions crackled in the air, as others watched closely, breathless with anticipation. Elijah could feel their hearts beating with his, anxious for the clash of courage and cruelty. And in that heart-stopping moment, Elijah realized he wasn't just fighting for Samuel. He was fighting for every parent who dared to hope for a better tomorrow, for every soul that had ever loved. The stakes rose, deeper than any soil he had ever tilled. Their lives intertwined, the community stood behind him, and silence hovered like a thick fog, heavy with unanswered questions. Would love's fire be enough to burn through the suffocating chains of their existence? As Elijah prepared to launch into the depths of this battle, that question loomed: would he find the strength within himself, or would despair swallow them whole? Elijah's heart raced like a wild stallion, pounding against his ribcage. The master's eyes glinted coldly, filled with contempt. "You think you can defy me?" His voice was a venomous hiss. "You are nothing but a man in chains." Elijah straightened, an ember of defiance igniting within him. "No more," he shouted, surprising himself with the depth of his conviction. "I will not let you take my son. Not today, not ever." Around him, voices whispered in hushed tones, each stolen glance fueled with a growing closeness that tethered them together. The air crackled with tension, the weight of history hung heavy as others gathered, a chorus rising in silent support. Born from pain, their strength surged, lifting Elijah's heart even higher. The master laughed, a chilling sound that sent shivers down everyone's spine. "You think these foolish words will protect him?" He took a step forward, his shadow a looming threat over Elijah. I will show you the cost of your rebellion. Elijah's breath quickened. He felt the helplessness gripping at his throat but recalled Samuel's laughter, the twinkle of hope in his innocent eyes. He couldn't allow fear to dictate his future. You can threaten us, but you will never break our spirit, he declared, his voice louder now, firm and unwavering. You will not destroy what we hold dear. A moment of silence followed, as if the very ground held its breath. Then the murmurs began, soft at first, swelling into a collective roar of agreement. Together we stand. They cried. For our children. For our families. The master's arrogance began to falter beneath the weight of their unity. His face twisted with fury, but just as quickly, it turned to uncertainty. He had always ruled through fear, but here they were, defiant and unyielding. Elijah's heart surged with pride, their courage ignited a spark of hope that leaped between them, a flame that could not be extinguished. But suddenly, the master raised his hand as if to strike. Enough! He thundered. You dare to challenge my authority? You no longer have what it takes to protect your boy. You are all slaves, and I will remind you of that. Elijah's resolve wavered for a heartbeat, but Samuel's face flashed through his mind. He could feel the warmth of the sun on his back and the scent of blooming flowers, the dreams they had whispered to each other on the good days, of freedom, of laughter, of a better place. The call to bravery welled up inside him like a mighty river, pushing against all that kept him down. You may think you can scare us, but all you foster is unity. He shot back, his voice cutting through the thickening air. We will not let you erase our love. In that moment, the shadows in the crowd shifted, and the sight of strong, determined faces meeting his own built a fortress around them. Elijah's heart pulsed with an unfamiliar, fierce energy. But just as the tide turned in their favor, the distant sound of galloping hooves echoed through the trees, growing louder by the second, a sound Elijah had nightmare visions about. Had they come to escort their loved ones away forever? Would this battle end in victory or despair? Elijah's grip tightened, ready to face whatever came next, uncertain of the outcome but steadfast in his determination. The choice was clear, to fight for love, or live forever in fear. And the time for that choice was now. As he turned to face the oncoming storm, he whispered a prayer for strength, his attention focused, or was it fear growing stronger on the shadows darting toward them? What had they unleashed? The thunder of hooves grew louder, pounding like drumbeats in Elijah's chest. He stood firm, surrounded by those who had rallied behind him. Their faces, lit by a flickering fire of hope, marked the line between despair and courage. Hurry! A woman shouted, her eyes wide with dread. They come for our children. Elijah's heart sank. Thoughts of Samuel knotted his stomach. How long could he protect him? He glanced at the crowd, seeing uncertainty creeping back in, but he couldn't let that happen. Not now. Listen to me. Elijah's voice rippled through the gathering. They may come with whips and chains, but they will never take our spirit. If we stand together, they'll think twice before they cross us. A fire sparked in their eyes, his words mixing with the urgent energy of the moment. They nodded, fists clenched, breaths coming in harder bursts. But fear was a creeping vine, sneaking its way into the hearts of some. What can we do? Asked a trembling voice from the back. They'll just use their weapons against us. Elijah locked eyes with that speaker, trying to infuse his spirit into their words. We have something they don't, a bond forged in love. We are families. Together, we are strong enough to carry each other's burdens. Then he turned towards the approaching figures, his jaw set in determination. As the first riders broke through the trees, sunlight glinting off their swords, Elijah held his breath. Clad in authority and arrogance, they leaned forward in their saddles, their eyes scanning for weakness. Then came a man, larger than the rest, who dismounted with a heavy thud. The master's enforcer. His eyes were dark and cold, matching the expectancy in the air. Elijah. He called out, voice booming, "You should kneel. You are nothing but a slave, born to serve." The crowd stirred, a wave of unease washing over them. They were caught in the moment, fear hungry to spill over. But there was no turning back now. Not today. Elijah shouted back, stepping toward the enforcer with every ounce of courage he could muster. "Today we show you that we are more than just names on a ledger." The enforcer's lips curled into a cruel smile. "You think that your little uprising will change anything? You are still slaves, and I will remind you of that." As his words hung in the air, Elijah felt the warmth of shared resolve flow through him again. He turned to face the crowd, seeing determination etched into each face. "Remember, our strength lies within our unity. We are not just slaves, we have families, dreams, and love that fuels our fight." With that, a roar erupted from the crowd, powerful and liberating. "For our children!" they cried. "For our families! For freedom!" In that moment, as the enforcer took a step back, Elijah's heart raced with a blend of fear and exhilaration. He sensed a shift in the air, it was a breath of something monumental. But the enforcer raised his hand, and silence fell again, thick like a storm cloud hanging over their heads. "Then let us see how strong your love is," he challenged, drawing his sword, its blade gleaming with malice. Elijah's breath hitched, facing the razor-sharp reality of the moment. Would his bravery hold? Would unity still stand as the ultimate shield? The air crackled as tension intertwined with hope. Elijah felt it all pulse around him. In this moment, everything was at stake for him, for Samuel, and for all of them. "Fight!" he shouted, feeling the power surging within. "Fight for those you love." But as the clash began, it was clear that something deeper was about to be unleashed, something none of them anticipated. What would happen when the dust settled? Would love prevail over fear? The clash began with a roar as the enforcer swung his sword, aiming for Elijah. Time seemed to stretch in those heart-pounding moments. Elijah ducked, feeling the rush of wind as the blade sliced through the air where he had just stood. He couldn't breathe, not for fear, but for the weight of responsibility pressing on his chest. "Stand strong!" he shouted, rallying the others. His heart thumped wildly. Each soul behind him was a lifeline, their courage intertwining with his. As they braced themselves, the first few stepped forward, brandishing makeshift weapons, a broom handle, a heavy rock, anything they could find. They were fueled by familial love, their eyes alight with determination. Like a wave, they surged toward the enforcer and his men, striking out not just for their lives, but for a future unshackled from despair. Elijah felt a surge of warmth, pride swelling in his chest. They were not warriors by trade, but mothers, fathers, and friends, refusing to let fear dictate their fates. The enforcer looked momentarily taken aback by the ferocity of the crowd. Scowling, he rallied his men, barking orders that fell on deaf ears as the fervor of hope drowned out his fury. For once, he was the one who was outnumbered. As the clash intensified, Elijah found himself beside a woman he recognized from the village, her expression fierce as she swung her broomstick. "For our children!" she shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos, invigorating those around her. Elijah caught sight of Samuel peeking out from behind a nearby tree, wide-eyed and filled with terror. His heart stuttered, the thought of harm befalling his son clenched at his insides. He couldn't lose this momentum now. "Samuel!" he yelled, voice cracking. "Stay back. We'll be all right." Caught in the whirlwind of emotions, Samuel nodded, but the fear in his eyes cut deeper than any blade. The enforcer, realizing he'd lost control, turned to face Elijah, his fury radiating like heat waves. "You think you can win with this rabble?" he sneered, face flushed with anger. "I will show you the true meaning of despair." With a furious howl, the enforcer charged toward Elijah, the weight of power behind his every step. All at once, time slowed, and Elijah felt the eyes of every person behind him glued to the unfolding battle. This wasn't just about his fight anymore, it was about love, families, and generations that deserved a brighter future. Elijah braced himself, setting his jaw as fear twisted like a vine in his gut. He closed his eyes for a split second, drawing strength from those around him. For our families. He called out, fists clenched. Fight for what matters. As they surged forward, Elijah dove to the side, away from the brunt of the enforcer's wrath and his sword's deadly arc. He landed with a roll, scrambling to his feet. Heart racing, he launched himself into the fray, ready to protect Samuel, ready to fight for freedom. But just as the tide turned in their favor, a sudden crack erupted near the edge of the forest, loud and unnerving. Everyone froze, eyes darting toward the source of the sound. "Look!" Someone shouted, pointing with a trembling finger. Out of the woods emerged a figure, shrouded in shadow, moving purposefully toward the chaos. Elijah's pulse quickened. Who was this stranger? Did they come as friend or foe? As fear and hope collided once more, Elijah felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. Fate hung in the balance, and the answer to their plight was rushing toward them like a storm. What secrets lay hidden behind the approaching figure? Would they be the salvation everyone desperately needed, or another challenge to face head-on? The figure stepped out of the shadows, revealing a tall man with a fierce gaze and an air of confidence that demanded attention. His presence was both daunting and strangely reassuring. Elijah's heart raced for a different reason now. Was this the ally they hoped for or yet another foe? As the crowd held its breath, the man raised his arms, palms facing outwards, a gesture of peace, yet one that carried an undeniable readiness for battle if it should come to that. "I mean you no harm," he bellowed, his voice booming over the clamor of the struggle. "I am Ezekiel, and I've come to fight alongside you." Elijah exchanged glances with the villagers, uncertainty dancing in their eyes. But the enforcer, now visibly enraged, seemed to see the newcomer as a threat. He bared his teeth in a defiant grin. "Another fool thinking he can change the tides. Your bravado will do you no good today." Ignoring the taunt, Ezekiel declared, "This is a fight for freedom, not just for yourselves, but for everyone whose voice has been silenced." A chorus of murmurs rippled through the villagers. Freedom, Elijah thought, feeling the weight of the word, the promise it held. If they could stand united, maybe they could change everything. With renewed conviction, Ezekiel forged ahead, eyes blazing like a wildfire. He plowed through the fray, gathering the desperate souls behind him as he moved. Elijah felt a surge of hope. The man was like a beacon, drawing the fearful and uncertain together. Elijah, too, found himself swept along by the flood of courage. He pushed forward, adrenaline coursing through him. The enforcer's men stumbled in backward confusion as Ezekiel and the villagers pressed on. Together, they became a single unit, moving as one heartbeat. "Samuel!" Elijah cried, catching sight of his son again. The boy had crept further out from behind the tree, his fear replaced by a glimmer of hope. "Stay with me!" Elijah shouted, his heart swelling with a protective instinct that ignited his determination. Just then, the enforcer turned to Ezekiel, his rage boiling over. "You think your presence can intimidate me? You know nothing of despair." Ezekiel stood firm, the crowd behind him merging strength into an impenetrable wall. "And you know nothing of the resilience of those you seek to oppress." In that moment, Elijah saw a flash of connection between the two men, a bond forged in the fires of struggle. It was nearly electric. Then, they clashed. Elijah dove forward, grappling with an enforcer goon who had circled in close. They tumbled to the ground, fists flying. It was clumsy and wild, but it was their fight, and it mattered. Elijah could hear the cries of his neighbors rising above the sounds of the clash. "For our freedom!" flew on the wind, wild and desperate. As he rolled to his feet, he glimpsed Ezekiel, immersed in combat with the enforcer. It was a fierce dance, sparks flew from clashing steel as they struck again and again. Each time they collided, it was like the earth might split open beneath them. But amidst the chaos, the energy shifted again. Using the strength of the villagers, Ezekiel rallied them, creating a formation that pressed against the enforcer and his men. With one powerful surge, they pushed forward, reclaiming ground lost to despair. Elijah caught a glimpse of Samuel's face. Hope lit it like the dawn breaking after a long night. With every strike, they were not just fighting for their lives but igniting a flame of rebellion that could ignite their village and beyond. But the enforcer, now cornered and desperate, pulled back and raised his sword high, intent on making a last stand. "You will regret this," he bellowed, eyes wild with fury. At that moment, as harmony and chaos collided, Elijah felt something shift within him. He understood now that this fight was transcending everything he had feared. "Together!" Ezekiel shouted. Elijah nodded, raw determination flooding his veins. As they surged forward one last time, another crack echoed in the woodlands, more ominous, more thunderous. It was a sound they hadn't anticipated. What was coming now? Was it salvation or ruin? The fight that had begun for survival was inching toward a crossroads no one could foresee. The air crackled with tension as the thunderous noise echoed through the trees. The villagers halted in their tracks, fear momentarily overtaking the fire of rebellion they had just ignited. They exchanged wary glances, uncertainty flickering again in their eyes, now shadowed with dread. What was that? Someone whispered, their voice barely rising above the clamor of clashing swords. The enforcer's expression twisted with confusion, his bravado faltering momentarily as he peered into the trees. "Stay alert," he barked, retreating a step, his sword still raised as if it could block whatever was coming. Elijah turned to Ezekiel, desperate eyes seeking reassurance. "What is happening?" he breathed, the grip on his own weapon tightening as the thundering sound grew closer. Ezekiel's face hardened as he scanned their surroundings, eyes sharp and alert. "We need to stay united. Whatever it is, we face it together." His voice rang with authority, the belief in his words grounding those who begun to tremble. With that, the ground beneath them began to shake, a low rumble that spread, vibrating through their feet like a heartbeat. The trees swayed, and the air carried an eerie silence, like the moment before a storm breaks. Just as they braced themselves, a flash of movement caught Elijah's eye, a shadow darting through the trees, low and fast. It burst through the thicket, racing toward them with alarming speed. It was a wild boar, its furious eyes filled with panic, rushing past them, pursued by a pack of hunters. The villagers had no time to react, the chaotic scene blurred into a frenzy as the boar careened into their formation, knocking several men off their feet. "Get out of the way!" Ezekiel shouted, using his strength to shove Elijah and Samuel aside, just as the beast crashed into the front of the line with an ear-piercing snarl. The enforcer took advantage of the chaos, slipping back and regrouping his men, fury mixed with confusion flashing across their faces. "Stand your ground!" he howled in a mix of fear and anger. "This isn't over." Driven by the moment, Elijah found himself looking at Samuel, wide-eyed. "Stay close," he instructed, his voice firm despite the turmoil. Elijah and Ezekiel moved, rallying the villagers to regain their footing. They were the tide, pushing against the fear, the anger, and the madness as they reformed their collective strength. "For every soul that has dared to hope," Ezekiel shouted, and they echoed the chant back, louder, as if it could drown out the panic. Elijah felt alive. Each heartbeat synced with the rallying cries, blending desperation with defiance. He surged forward, shoulder to shoulder with Ezekiel, leading the charge. This time, they were not just facing the enforcer and his cruelty. They were confronting something far larger, fear itself. One by one, the villagers found their voices again, rallying and rising as a single unit against the encroaching darkness that had threatened to consume them. As the enforcer realized that hope had sprouted like weeds through cracks in stone, he became desperate. "There's no place for you here. You think you can change what is meant to be?" He screamed, his face twisting with rage. But they didn't falter. Together they were stronger. They pressed forward, anticipating the enforcer's move, Elijah's blood boiling with purpose. Now! Ezekiel shouted, and they charged, hearts pounding as they stormed the ground beneath the enforcer's feet. Yet just as they made their advance, another terrifying crack rang through the air, echoing off the trees once more. It was louder now, undeniable. Something was coming, and the world outside their fight was shifting ominously. What awaited them in the depths of the woodlands, and how would it forge the destiny they fought for? Would it challenge them even more deeply than the enforcer's tyranny? The boar vanished into the underbrush, and the echo of its panic-filled flight hung in the air, thickening the tension. Silence settled over the villagers, a fragile truce between chaos and dread. Elijah's heart hammered in his chest as adrenaline coursed through him. He felt alive, but more so, he felt the weight of the battle ahead. "What do we do now?" Samuel asked, voice trembling slightly. His wide eyes darted towards the enforcer, who was pacing back and forth, trying to regain control over his floundering men. Ezekiel's gaze was locked on the enforcer, but he took a moment to steady himself before answering. "We fight not just for ourselves, but for everything that's made us suffer. Remember that." The villagers absorbed Ezekiel's words, each person taking a small piece of courage from them. They regained their stance, swords gripping hands tightly in defiance. A murmur floated among them, a gathering storm of hope opposing the enforcer's harrowed warnings. "You think they'll follow you? They are nothing without me," the enforcer spat, attempting to ignite fear again. His voice, once steady, now held a slight tremor of uncertainty. "Prove it." Elijah shouted back, finding his own voice among the angry cries. Instinct kicked in, rage mixed with a newfound fervor. He planted his feet, invigorated by a singular thought: freedom wasn't just a dream anymore, it was palpable. Then the ground shook violently again, and desperation clawed at the edges of the villagers' resolve. The trees swayed as another monstrous sound pierced through the air, a crack and then a crashing thud followed. A giant form broke through the foliage, sprawling into their clearing. It was the fallen trunk of a tree, uprooted by the relentless surge of a storm lurking in the distance. "Fall back!" The enforcer shrieked, instinct-driven fear curling around his words like smoke. The men around him stumbled, confusion painting their faces as they turned from the villagers to the encroaching threat before them. Elijah's focus remained fixed on Ezekiel. "This is our chance." "They're disoriented. Stay low. Work as one." Ezekiel commanded, his leadership shining through as he called for action. In that moment of chaos, the villagers surged. They broke their ranks, a tidal wave of unity clashing against the enforcer and his stunned troops. The scent of fear, mingling with freshly disturbed earth, only fueled their fervor. Elijah found himself in the thick of it, adrenaline making him feel like he could conquer the world. He moved beside Ezekiel, their bodies weaving through the chaos. The villagers shouted, each word a battle cry, pushing the enforcer further and further into retreat. They caught a glimpse of the enforcer, fear creeping into his eyes as confusion transformed into regret. "What have I done?" he shouted, pitching back further as they pressed on. Just as victory seemed possible, another roaring crack erupted from the treetops above. A flash of lightning illuminated the darkening sky, a precursor to a torrential downpour that was on the verge of unleashing its fury. A chilling thought pierced through Elijah's excitement. What if the storm changes everything? He wondered. The ground was slick beneath their feet, echoes of danger lurked in every shadow. Would the storm drown out their voices, their hopes? The enforcer seemed to cower behind his men, their formation trembling against the sheer force of the villagers' rebellion, or would they become easy prey for nature's fury? He turned to Ezekiel, uncertainty creeping in as the rain began to fall. Can we still fight against both? In that moment, beneath the storm clouds looming above, they had a choice. To either succumb to fear or face the tempest. And somewhere amidst the chaos, a fierce resolve sparked in Elijah's chest. Would they rise together, or would the storm wash their dreams away? The first drops fell like little bullets against the ground. A winter storm of emotions swirled as the heavy sky mirrored the turmoil in Elijah's heart. Rain began to fill the air, thickening the atmosphere, blurring the lines between fear and determination. He glanced up at Ezekiel, who stood resolute, his eyes ablaze with purpose. This wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about reclaiming their dignity. Push forward. Ezekiel's voice boomed above the thunder, seemingly piercing through the chaotic symphony of rain and fear. The villagers echoed his command, rallying together. Elijah ran beside his neighbors, adrenaline coursing through him like wildfire. They clashed against the enforcer's men, their faces filled with fear but driven by a shared desperation. The enforcer staggered backward, the encroaching storm clashing with the storm of rebellion swirling around him. Lightning cleaved the sky, illuminating the faces of the villagers exhilarated, terrified, alive. A sense of unity washed over them, understanding that this was their moment together. They surged forward, fists clenched, hearts in sync, as they fought more than just the men before them, they fought against the weight of generations of oppression. Elijah felt each step bringing him closer to the freedom he had only dreamed of until now. "We won't let this moment slip away," he chanted softly, more for himself than anyone else. With every strike, every movement, he remained acutely aware of the roar of the rain and the booming thunder, but there was also a deeper roar inside him. This was their fight, they would not be silenced. But just as hope surged, the ground turned slippery beneath their feet, each step becoming more precarious. Panic crept back in, gnawing at the edges of their determination. Faces contorted in effort and fear reflected a hard truth: this storm could easily take everything they fought for, alongside their lives. "Stay together," Ezekiel shouted, his voice a beacon. "Fight together." His words ricocheted through the air, igniting flames of courage once more. The rain fell harder, turning the battlefield into a slippery, muddy battlefield. Elijah stumbled but regained his footing, the energy of the villagers lifting him. He turned to Samuel, who had found his place at the forefront, eyes filled with fear but also fierce determination. "We can't stop. Not now." A fiercer roar of thunder nipped at their heels, urging them forward. The enforcer glanced around, panic etched deep in his expression. For a moment, it seemed as if he might falter, that he might turn and flee. But just as quickly, he squashed that thought. "No!" he shouted, rage inching into his voice. "You think you can take this from me?" He looked desperate, his bravado collapsing under the weight of impending defeat. "You don't know what you're facing. What we face doesn't matter anymore." Ezekiel shouted back, unwavering. "You've lost us. And now we rise." At that moment, molten lightning split the sky in two, casting eerie shadows and unearthly light across the battleground. The very air crackled with energy and the taste of rain mingled with purification. It was the storm they had long prepared for, the battle they had long desired. But within that glorious moment, a sudden realization pierced through Elijah's thoughts. As the storm brewed overhead, it had the potential to engulf everything: the rebellion, their dreams, and perhaps even their lives. As he looked around at his fellow villagers, he knew that whatever happened next, they had crossed a threshold from which there was no return. "We can't let the storm stop us," Elijah yelled, determination flooding his voice. But a deeper question began to shape in his mind: can hope survive in the tempest's heart? A surge of emotion gripped him. The truth of their struggle spread like wildfire through the hearts of all those around him. Would they stand united against the might of nature itself, or be swept away, just like the very dreams they fought to bring forth? Elijah's breath came in quick gasps, the weight of the moment pressing hard against his chest. As the enforcer's men pushed back with renewed ferocity, panic turned to resolve, igniting a fierce fire within him. He could see the fear twist on the faces of his fellow villagers, but they stood shoulder to shoulder, eyes gleaming with something far stronger than dread: defiance. "Don't lose heart. Ezekiel's powerful voice cut through the chaos like a lifeline. This storm is our ally. They've held us down long enough. Elijah felt the rhythm of their collective heartbeat, a steady thrum echoing through the rain. He clutched the arm of Samuel, sharing a fierce, unspoken vow. They were in this together, bound by blood and spirit. The air crackled not just with lightning but with an electric sense of purpose. Each villager became a ripple in a growing wave of hope. As the storm swirled around them, something shifted in Elijah. He could feel the weight of the generations that had come before him, their struggles, their triumphs, their sacrifices. And against the backdrop of the rising fury, he felt their spirits rising with him. With a surge of determination, he charged forward, leading Samuel and the others in a united front. Their movements were powerful, synchronized, a force of nature against the darkness. Rain pooled around their feet, turning the ground slick, but it only made them dig deeper, working harder to maintain their bare footing. Each step they took, every slashing fist and brave heart, pushed against the tide of oppression that had sought to swallow them. The enforcer's men were losing cohesion as their leader shouted commands lost to the wind, confusion setting in. Elijah spotted a gap in their line, an opportunity that could turn the tide. Head left. He shouted, gesturing to Ezekiel and the wavered crowd behind him. Now. Follow me. The shift sent shockwaves rippling through the enemy ranks. The villagers surged, breaking through the disarray. The tension, heavy with desperation, exploded like the sky above them. Elijah charged, adrenaline buzzing through his veins, and threw all caution to the wind. If they could just push through, they might reclaim the freedom that had been stolen for so long. They crashed into the enforcer's men, fists flying and feet pounding. Adrenaline roared around them, an anthem of resilience. But for every blow they landed, the relentless storm above raged harder, and Elijah felt the ground beneath him tremble. In this moment of chaos, he began to fear that the storm of their fight might drown their hope rather than elevate it. Keep going. He shouted, feeling the weight of his words as they gathered strength in the downpour. But doubts began to swirl in his mind. How long could they endure this? Then, huddled in the back of the chaos, he caught sight of a familiar figure. A child had been swept into the fray, eyes wide with terror. Elijah's heart plummeted. The little boy was clinging to his mother, who was valiantly trying to shield him from the surrounding chaos. The moment froze in time, a clash of innocence against brutality. Elijah's pulse quickened. In that flash, everything became clear. This battle was for those kids, for every life filled with dread and sorrow. He steeled himself, rooting his feet into the mud. We can't let them suffer any longer. The villagers seemed to echo his thoughts, rallying behind him as they pushed back fiercely, refusing to falter in the face of the storm both above and around them. But as Elijah charged forward once more, the enforcer locked eyes with him, a snarl twisting his features. It was then that Elijah understood this fight was not just against men, but a fight against the very roots of despair that had long poisoned their lives. Could they overpower the fear that paralyzed them for generations? Could they reclaim their lives from that darkness? Lightning cracked abruptly across the sky as the enforcer lunged forward, fury ablaze in his eyes. In that climactic moment, everything hinged on Elijah's next move. Did he have the courage to protect not just his people, but the innocence that still shone brightly amidst the turmoil? As Elijah squared his shoulders against the storm's wrath, he knew he had made the choice to fight to the end. But would that choice lead to redemption or ruin? The rain lashed down in sheets, turning the ground into a swirling mess of mud and chaos. As the enforcer lunged toward Elijah, a burst of clarity surged through him like a lightning strike. This fight wasn't just personal anymore. It was about every child, every family, every dream that had been crushed underfoot for far too long. Today, we choose freedom. Elijah roared, each word fueled by the tempest swirling around them. He stepped forward, eyes blazing with purpose. The enforcer's wicked smile faltered, confusion flaring as he realized the tide was shifting. The villagers pressed forward, fear giving way to fervent unity as they faced this embodiment of their struggles. Ezekiel moved by Elijah's side, determination etched on his face. Together, he shouted, and the resonance of their voices melded into a surge, a force that bucked against the storm. Elijah felt the energy ripple through him, joining hands with Samuel and others. All around, mothers, fathers, brothers, and sisters forged a human chain, each one a vital link in the battle for their lives. For freedom. They cried, their hearts thrumming in sync with the rhythms of hope and love. Elijah turned to his son, who stood tall despite the chaos swirling around them. "Stay close, Samuel, and don't look back," he instructed, his voice steady despite the tumult. Samuel nodded, fear morphing into focus, courage welling in those bright eyes. They were a family, and love was their strongest weapon. As the enforcer swung his sword, adrenaline surged through Elijah's veins. He was ready, he had to be. With a fierce yell, he dodged the blade, diving forward and pushing against the enforcer. The clash felt electric, reverberating through the tension-laden air. Each blow echoed past generations, striking against the chains that had bound them for too long. The enforcer staggered back, shock creeping into his features as Elijah found his footing. "You'll regret this," he hissed, but there was an uncertainty in his voice that hadn't been there before. "No," Elijah replied, breathless but resolute. "You'll regret underestimating what we fight for." He lunged again, forcing the enforcer to retreat. The villagers rallied behind him, moving as one, a cohort of resilience against tyranny. The clouds swirled ominously, dark and heavy, but in that very moment, it felt as though the storm was their ally. With each clash, their strength soared, and fear began to recede like the tide. Elijah felt the raw energy build among the villagers, unity bred courage. The enforcer's men faltered, their resolve crumbling under the weight of their fear mixed with doubt. They realized this wasn't an ordinary battle. It was a rebirth, a declaration that they were tired of going unnoticed. "Never again!" cried a woman beside Elijah, swinging her makeshift weapon, her eyes fierce with determination. Her voice spurred the crowd, igniting embers of hope. Together, they surged ahead, pressing toward the retreating enforcer, who now wore a mask of panic. Realizing he had lost control, the enforcer raised his sword, desperation clawing at him. "Enough! I will remind you what you are." But the villagers were determined. They wouldn't let that hollow refrain seep into their hearts again. "Remember our hope," Elijah shouted, gazing into the faces of every person beside him. Each smile, every nod, reflected the strength in unity. The rain poured, but they were invincible. In that furious moment, Elijah felt a roar of triumph rising from deep within. Together, they were a force, and their love would not be extinguished. As they pressed closer, a heart-stopping battle cry erupted from their ranks. "For our children! For our freedom!" The earth seemed to tremble beneath their feet, resonating with their fierce determination. The enforcer stumbled, the weight of their united spirit became tangible, and for the first time in years, Elijah felt raw power coursing through him. He dove forward, determined to reclaim what had been taken, everything they deserved. And suddenly, from the deepening chaos, a bolt of lightning illuminated the scene, casting shadows in stark relief against the torrential downpour. It was a sign, a celestial reminder of the strength within them. Elijah lunged once more, and in that moment of breathtaking clarity, he felt the true essence of freedom surge through the air. The enforcer's sword fell, struck by doubt, the barrier of fear crumbled, and Elijah charged forward. He had his son to protect, a community that deserved to rise, and he would not falter. "Now!" Elijah shouted, and they surged as one, hearts pounding, voices rising in unison. They had overcome despair, a storm of hope crashing over them, and as they pressed forward, they were no longer just fighting for survival. They were declaring their rightful place in the world, reclaiming their lives, their families, and their futures. As they collided into the enforcer, the world around them exploded in brightness, light merging with storm, hope mingling with fury. In that moment, everything changed, love prevailed, and together, they became what they were always meant to be: free. The storm rumbled behind them, a reminder of what they had fought through, but as Elijah stood tall, the look in Samuel's eyes told him they had won more than just this battle. They had forged a new future, one built on resilience, unity, and the unyielding power of love. Elijah smiled, a radiant light breaking through the clouds overhead. For this was not an ending, but a beginning of fresh dawn where their voices would rise and carry them toward a destiny they would shape together. Now, it's your turn. You need to subscribe right now to catch the next incredible stories we share. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help us reach others who need this inspiration in their lives. Comment below with your reactions and feelings about this powerful ending. Don't wait not even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. Together, let us keep the spirit of resilience shining bright.